Well, we'll get started anyway.
Like that.
Ken, you want to start us off, please?
You can do that, sure, thank you. Just a reminder that we will be recording this meeting. Board members, staff, guests, and members of the public are advised that the SCRCA board meetings are being video audio recorded and will be live streamed and posted to the utilities YouTube, along with the official written minutes on the website. As such, comments and opinions expressed may be published, and any comments expressed by individual board members, guests, and the general public are their own and do not represent the opinions or comments of the local authority and or the SCRCA board of directors. The recorded video of the full authority meeting is not considered the official record of that meeting. The official record of the authority meeting shall consist solely of the minutes approved by the board of directors. At this point, I'd ask that all mics be muted. You need to unmute before speaking. Chair will be asking for opposition only on items of business. If you oppose, please raise your hand and the chair will acknowledge you or use the chat function. Our preference is that you physically raise your hand to communicate where possible. To move second, ask questions or express opinion, please leave your hand raised until you are acknowledged. If you do not have video access or access to a video camera, you can unmute and speak up and use the chat feature. When speaking, please remember to give your first name. Now back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll ask Ashley, do the roll call, please.
John Brennan,
Present.
Al Broad,
Present.
Pat Brown,
Present.
Terry Burrell,
Present.
Sue Cates,
Present.
Anne Marie Gillis,
Present.
Greg Grimes,
Present.
Aaron Hall,
Present.
Emery Bushell,
Present.
Rhonda Jubinville. Rhonda is here. Frank Kennis,
Present.
Adam Kilner has sent it for regrets. Betty Ann McKinnon,
Present.
Don McCabe,
Yeah.
Don McCallum,
Present.
Mary Lynn McCallum, present. Steve Miller,
Present.
Ross O'Hara,
Present.
Kristen Rodriguez,
Present.
Lori Scott,
Present.
and Jerry Westgate.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Welcome, everybody. It's a cloudy day, but at least it's dry today, so we'll carry on with our business here. And need a mover, please, for the agenda. Oh, land acknowledgement, sorry. We'll get Ken to do the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. The St. Clair Region Conservation Authority acknowledges that its watershed is part of the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and the Chinungtan nations, who have a sacred responsibility to preserve the land and water in southwestern Ontario. The SCRCA acknowledges the treaties that allow us to work alongside First Nation communities of Kettle, Stony Point, Aamjiwnaang, and Wet'suwet'en, to ensure the responsibility of preserving the land and water.
Okay, it is requested that each director declare a conflict of interest at the appropriate time on any item within this agenda, in that a director may have a pecuniary interest. A mover, please, for adopting the agenda. Greg Grimes moved and seconded by Frank Kennis. Any opposed? I'll take that as carried. Okay. A mover, please, for the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on February 29th, 2024 be approved as distributed. That was our AGM meeting. Sue Cates moved, seconded by Terry Burrell. Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried. The next item is a presentation, and I'll let Girish, if our presenter's online, I'll let him introduce it's Stu Seabrooks of Briggs Engineering.
Mr. Chair. Please join me in welcoming Stu Seabrook. Stu is a senior water resources engineer with Briggs Engineering. Stu has over 40 years of experience in floodplain mapping and marine engineering. The project is in safe hands And he's been working diligently over the last 4 to 5 years on our floodplain mapping project. So please, welcome Stu. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Girish. Do you want me to try to share from here, or is it something that you guys run the presentation from there? How does it best work?
You can share from your computer, please.
Okay, I'm going to log in on a different name here, or a different computer, just to share that screen. Will you see me coming in there, do you? Whoever's, oh. Okay,
There we go. Yes.
okay.
You got your presentation up now, Stu.
All right. Whoops, I don't want to drag it from there maybe, or can I? Can I drag it?
Did move.
Yep, all right, we're still good. Okay. Here. Got too many things obscuring my view of my own show here. Okay, are we up?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. Sorry for the little delay there. So yeah, my name's Stu Seabrook. I'm with Riggs Associates. We've been working on this for a few years now, as Girish had indicated there. We have completed the work now and are working through, I guess, some of the finalities with Girish before we get to an information transfer session. But the deliverables have been submitted, and St. Clair staff is going through those right now, and we're working on a few things just to clarify this and that, and we'll carry on as need be. Trying to get to the next slide here. Whoops. Sorry about that. Okay. So the objectives of this project were really just basically to update the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority regulatory floodlines. These had been done last in 2009. And there have been a number of improvements, I guess, in terms of technology and information available that I will discuss a little bit in this presentation. Generally, there were three basic objectives. One was to review and update the hydrologic assessments for the analysis. That's the generation of the flow estimates that go into the modeling. We were looking at the regional flood estimate. I'm going to use the word regional in a couple of senses here. When I say regional flood, this is your regulatory flood, typically Hurricane Hazel for most of your catchment areas. So we were updating the analysis or the flow estimates for that flood. And St. Clair Conservation Authority staff also wanted us to provide 100-year flood estimates as well, which gave them some opportunity to look at basically the risk of certain development scenarios in I guess respect of the difference between something as large as the regulatory flood and still a significant 100-year flood estimate. We were also updating the hydraulic analysis component of the floodline mapping itself. That's really updating the modeling that is behind the floodline mapping. We're updating that with improved terrain information. We were including additional hydraulic structures, so this is bridges and culverts in the analysis. And as indicated, we were providing a 100-year hydraulic modeling as well, in addition to that regulatory flood or regional flood analysis. And then once the modeling was completed, we went to work and updated the floodline mapping itself, putting those flood limits on the topographic mapping that is available for the watershed at this point in time. There's some improved tools, I guess, to do that as well. So those were utilized at this point in time and indicate, as I said, it includes the regional and 100-year flood lines. The primary improvement, I guess, that has been taken advantage of in these updated flood lines, two facets, I guess. One is the digital elevation model itself. That's the topography that goes into the analysis. The 2009 analysis was based on a digital elevation model or topography that had spot elevations, if you will, on a 10 by 10 meter grid. The current model or the current digital elevation model that we've used is a 2 by 2 meter grid. So you can imagine that in the old mapping, we would have had in a 10-meter square section, we would have had points on the corners. At this point in time, with a 10 meter by 10 meter section, we have 25 points within that area. And also, I guess I should note that the accuracy of those elevations will have improved over time as well, just due to the remote sensing capabilities in generating these digital elevation models. So that's a significant improvement in the ability to put these models and the flood lines together. The other improvement was including a large number of hydraulic structures, bridges and culverts that were not included in the 2009 modeling. In that analysis, they had included structures along the East Sydenham River, but that was all that was included in that analysis. So a lot of this other area went without the benefit of analyzing the flow through or around or over bridges and culverts within the floodplain. So, and those are fairly significant impacts in terms of the overall water surface profile and backwater that's generated under a flood flow condition. Over on the right here, you can just see a representation of the topography of the watershed based on this improved digital elevation model. In terms of updating the hydrologic assessments or the flow estimate improvements here, the 2009 model used a regional flood equation. That was based on some previous analyses where some modeling had been done. I'll note quickly that the regional flood, this historic storm, is an event where there is really no watershed data for it, some measured flows or anything like that. So it's based on a modeling exercise. The 2009 analysis had looked at previous modeling exercises throughout the region and taken the results of the regional flood, put them together and looked at an equation to try to fit those flow rates to represent a regional flood estimate based on a watershed area size. So it was a curve fitting approach. We revisited that curve fitting approach. We found that it is still relevant, I guess, in most part. The only issue was that in some of the larger watershed areas, you can see in this plot here to the left, the old curve was significantly above some of the data points from the analysis. What we've done then is we've now come with an adjustment to that curve to bring it more in line with those flow estimates for the larger watershed. So that was a tweak to the regional flood estimate. As I indicated, we were generating 100-year flows for the watersheds as well. There is stream gauge information that we've used to come up with 100-year flow estimates at these various points where you can see the stream gauges are noted. Because they're relatively sparse, we need something that's a little more applicable throughout the watershed. So we've taken those 100-year flow estimates and we've fit those or compared them to existing regional flow analysis. Now, when I say regional in this sense, I'm really just talking the regional space. So your St. Clair watershed and some of the areas around here, looking at those stream gauges and the 100-year flow estimates, fitting those to some available regional regression curves. And we found that the UOFM curve which is an MTO generated regional curve, fit relatively well. We do have some conservative, this is the curve here, the estimate, the data being in the blue and the red. We do get some conservative representation in some of the larger watersheds. In this case, we're not quite so concerned about those here because they're not typically the regulatory flood. It's a tool for the staff to use to look at the risk of certain development proposals. So we found this UOFM regression curve was a good generator for the 100-year flow estimate just based on watershed size. So we have two equations now that we're using with watershed catchment size to generate a flow estimate at any point in the watershed. The other improvement, I guess, if I can call it that, typically in a HEC-RAS model, which we're using here, it's a steady state analysis. Flows are estimated on a reach by reach basis. We can look at incrementally smaller and smaller reaches, but in a watershed or an area the size of St. Clair, we're looking at relatively large, sub-catchment areas. In this case, we would look at the catchment that contributed to this tributary here. In the 2009 analysis, the flow that is estimated at the bottom of that catchment, if you will, was applied to the entire catchment or the entire reach length. That's a typical approach in this steady state analysis. You take the flow at the downstream limit and you apply it through the entire reach. In this case, we've taken the flow at the downstream limit and we've prorated it throughout the reach so that we're applying a 25% flow estimate at the upstream limit to, I would call the 25% catchment limit. Then we put in a 50% flow estimate to the 50% flow or the 50% reach length. 75% flow estimate carries on to the 75% reach length, and the 100% flow estimate to the bottom of the tributary. So it is still somewhat conservative in that we're taking a 100-year flow estimate here and we're applying it upstream in the reach, but we've distributed it more generally within this reach length than it was in the 2009 modeling. So it's a lesser degree of conservatism, if you will, in the analysis to try to get these flows a little more representative on such a large scale. In terms of the hydraulic assessment itself, a couple of images here. Our modeling, it typically extends upstream to a point where we have 1.25 square kilometers contributing to that point in the reach. So basically the limits of any particular reach that's defined here in the light blue, the watershed area contributing upstream of that would be down to 1.25 square kilometers. At that point, generally, we're not seeing much of a defined channel. We're into agricultural fields, tile drains and things like that. So we're not really losing any information in there. And so that was considered to be an appropriate extent of the, excuse me, the analysis. The digital elevation model is providing a significant improvement in the definition of the river cross sections. I'll show you some of that in some subsequent slides here. The hydraulic structures that were surveyed by the St. Clair Conservation Authority staff have been input to the hydraulic model. You can see the yellow are the surveyed structures. You can see that there are hundreds of structures that was surveyed over the course of a couple of summers there. So significant effort to get this information into the model to improve the results. I would note that we actually did, even in the QC review, found a few structures that we still thought were relevant to include in the analyses of the red dots. So we have estimated structure sizes for those in order to get them into the modeling as well. And so I guess the last thing that I should mention is we do have good resolution aerial photography, remote sensed imaging now that we can use to help interpret the channel and the floodplain as we're inputting the cross section as the St. Clair staff are interpreting the results. So all these are improvements in terms of what was available for the 2009 assessment. I was going to go through three typical examples here, I guess, just to try to represent the difference in the information that's available at this point in time. These are more or less random locations throughout your watershed. One of these is on Hickory Creek, the first one here. We're looking at a cross section. As you can see, these little green lines here represent the cross sections in the hydraulic modeling. So you can see they're distributed, I would say 50 to 100 meter distance between sections on average, sometimes tighter, sometimes a little, you know, more distant if things are fairly regular in that area. But you can see there are, you know, hundreds and thousands of cross sections in these hydraulic models. So I'm looking at one particular cross section in 3 cases here just to represent the difference in the information that's available. So this is a 2009 representation. You can see the points. This is a typical cross section, the one that we're looking at in the red circle there. So this is what would be seen in the hydraulic model. And you can see that these little black dots are the representation of the cross section that's used in the flood analysis. This is a profile along that particular reach, so it would run basically from here back up to here, looking at the channel invert elevation, if you will. So you can see each of these dots here represents a cross-section location. So this is the kind of information that we had in the 2009 model. You can see in the updated model here now, we're looking at a point in the same location in the watershed. So this cross-section would be comparable in terms of what's in the field. This represents the level of detail that we have now in these cross sections. So you can see it's a much more refined representation of that cross section. Looking at the profile, again, this is the invert along that reach length. You can see that we've got a number of structures that are now included. And you can also see the representation or the impact of some of these structures on the floodwater elevation. So in the 2009 mapping, we had like basically just the channel was restricting the flow. In these cases, we get case areas where the cross section, including the culvert or the bridge, has an impact on that flow as well. So better representation of those local areas in the updated modeling. This is what happens when we've got these results completed and we're mapping it to the surface. So this is again Hickory Creek. I'm showing 3 floodline representations here. Hopefully you can see them on the screen there. There's a pale blue area, which represents the 2009 flood limits. The light blue area here represents our regional flood limit now, and the dark blue represents the 100-year flood limit. So you can see in a number of areas here, there is a reduction in the regional flood limit, the difference between this light blue and the pale blue and the light blue. There's a color for it, but I can't remember it right now, of course. But that's the difference then that the improvement in the analysis has resulted in representing the flows and the hydraulics themselves. You can see between the light blue and the dark blue, the light blue represents the additional flood area for the regional flood. In some of these cases, there's not a significant difference between the two. Those are in areas where the channel is relatively well defined. In other areas, such as this area up in here, you can see there's a significant difference between the regional flood limit and the 100-year flood limit. So the regional and the 100-year flood limit are the flood lines that have been supplied to the St. Clair staff at this point in time for their mapping purposes, and should replace the 2009 representation. So these are just 2 more representations, very similar comparison. You can see the 2009 cross-section and profile, much better resolution of that cross-section. Again, getting the hydraulic structures in represents the local impacts to those flood levels. This was on Bear Creek. Again, some representation of the difference in flood lines. You can see here, there is a bit of a curse associated with the improved resolution of the flood line or the digital elevation. You can see all these little spurious representations of flood limits here, and that's because we have such a good representation of the topography now that it fills all of those little depressions with flow or with water as we move up the system. But you can see again that there's a general reduction in many areas in terms of the regional flood versus what we've modeled now. Again, you can see the difference between the current regional flood and the current 100-year flood between the light blue and the dark blue. Similarly for Upper Sydenham, same kind of comparison. We're looking at similar cross-section locations. As I noted before, the Upper Sydenham did have bridges included in the original modeling. So we've got those bridges included here again with probably some additional or improved information in terms of the cross-section modeling. But again, we're really looking at a significant improvement in the cross-sections themselves. And again, just a representation of the difference in the floodline limits that have been defined at this point in time. So at the end of all this, the deliverables to the St. Clair Conservation Authority include the HEC-RAS models, the floodplain and the supporting shape files, a flood atlas image that's a representation. It's broken down in a number of grids. So we've got a map here that we provide. St. Clair staff are working this into their own database, of course. This is just for them to assist in their interpretation of it. And we provided a report with discussion of the approach and the results. And we're currently talking with Girish to plan a session for information transfer to basically discuss the model development and what goes into the representation of the channel and the floodplain, and how to use or change certain things in the modeling should the staff wish to look at a certain development proposal and look at a what if scenario. If there's a change in a cross section or something, they will have the tools to look at that, at least in a preliminary manner themselves, in order to help interpret development proposals. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions, or if we just pass it back?
Okay, thanks for your presentation, Stu. There is a lot of information there and
Yep.
data, so I don't know if anybody has any questions for you at this point. Terry Burrow, go ahead.
Yes, just, how do you work in, what happens with like roads? Because some roads are almost like dikes and between fields sometimes, and, how do they work into the,
Yeah, the roads are typically associated with the bridges and culverts. So when the channel comes to a road, there is a cross section defined on that road that represents the increased elevation or the blockage of the floodplain, and then the opening of the culvert is modeled. The culvert of the bridge is modeled in the hydraulics as well. That's why when you looked at those profiles, you could see the water surface would come up to a road, and in some cases it would jump up. And that's the effect of that road holding the water back in a significant flood. And you can see in some cases in the floodplain where you've got, grids of roads, that those roads basically retain the water in a certain area until it gets to a point where it may spill into, a field or something to the east or west, whatever the case may be. But they are included as obstructions generally in the modeling.
thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Don McKay, go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Two questions. Number one, what do you consider your air to be on this modeling? Is this done for the entire region, or is this model able to pick up only when you have a local storm on a very local area for a certain tributary or something like that? And second of all, I'm a farmer. I really don't care whether it's flooded 2 miles over. I only care when it's flooded on my place and how fast the water's gonna get out. So what's your definition of flood? Because retention time of the water on the land is what's important in my particular application for crop survival. So is that playing into what the work you've done here?
Okay, I'll try to get both of those questions in. The first one, the hydraulic model is representative of the entire watershed. So, any flow could be input to that hydraulic model, and it could be run to represent the water surface elevations within the channel. The flows themselves, as I said, they're based on regression equations from stream gauge data, and they are generated for a catchment area. So it's basically, if you know your catchment area, you provide it to the equation and it generates a flow estimate. There's certainly plus or minus in those flow estimates on a study of this size, given the variability in in the watershed, the soils, the cover, the slopes, all this kind of stuff. There is certainly plus or minus in those flow estimates. If somebody were to have a particular very localized issue, it would still probably be in their best interest to look more closely at the flow estimate, so that they can account for all of the local watershed or the local soil characteristics and those kind of things. So it's not intended for a continuous kind of hydrologic modeling, infiltration, base flow analysis. That's a very detailed hydrologic assessment, which this was not intended to be. This was intended to generate the 100-year and the regional, those massive flood flow estimates for regulatory mapping. The second question, I guess, in terms of the properties themselves, retention time is a lot to do with the hydrologic component of it. So again, if you're looking at how long that water stays on the soil before it infiltrates, that is something that is beyond the scope of this kind of assessment. This is looking at those large runoffs and trying to get that flow through the obstructions, the channel and the bridges in the watershed themselves, and give the Conservation Authority a definition of the limit of where the water will sit in the field. So in terms of the definition of flooding, it's basically the maximum extent that is expected during that event, but it does not reflect or does not have the capability of looking at how long that stays in the field. That's a, to be honest, a very complex kind of assessment. If your field is tile drained, if it has, high infiltration characteristics or low infiltration characteristics of the soil, if there's been a significant rainfall event before that, so that waters, the soils are saturated. Those are all, I guess, points that are beyond this level of analysis for sure. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it's led me to the final real question I wanted to get at, and that's the reality of, based on the improved modeling you've been able to achieve here, will there be any changes in recommendations on needed infrastructure replacement that's got to occur in many municipalities on culvert size going into the future? Because we've got numerous bridges that are going to be coming up in the near future for replacement or no replacement because there's no money to do so. And therefore, is it going to be the same size culvert, bigger? Are you going to recommend something bigger because you expect flow to be faster, so on and so forth?
So I guess the benefit or the use of the model that the St. Clair staff have now is that we have most of those bridges, except as I said, in the very upper limits of the watershed, most of those bridges will be included in the hydraulic model. So there will be a channel definition, a bridge definition, a road definition. The hydraulic analysis will indicate for at least the 100-year and the regional flood what the impact of those bridges are on that flood limit. Some of your road crossings might be a 25-year design criteria, in which case whoever is looking at that specific bridge design would take this model, would generate a 25-year flow estimate and put that into the model and analyze it and see whether the bridge, the existing bridge opening had the capacity and give you your freeboard to your road, or whether you needed to improve it. So the tool is basically here now to use for somebody who is looking at that specific bridge for replacement and can modify this model to look at a new bridge opening if they so desire or feel that it is necessary based on the results.
Thank you.
Okay. Emery, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, please. So thank you for the presentation. I understand a good base position to understand where we're going forward. I'm impressed with the precision for what you were able to show for what restriction of a man-made structure has already existingly demonstrated itself to be there. We have further in our agenda contemplation about a couple of dams and potential removal of those dams. So my question is, how easy is it for this model that you've presented to be updated with the new significant potential infrastructure changes? to that flow. And I realize there's calculations, but your analysis shows the existing water stream and the existing restrictions as they sit. If there is a major impact further upstream, downstream will have a significant impact as well. So I'm wondering how easy is this model updated with significant changes?
So I think there's two components to that question. The first, similar to the bridges, we have in this model now the cross sections and the structures defined. So you have a basis to work with in terms of looking at a new structure or a modification of an existing structure that's in place. If you're looking at and this technology transfer with St. Clair Conservation should give them some ability to be able to take the model and even plug in a few things themselves, block a certain portion of the channel here or there if that's the representation of the dam. When you get into certainly the fine tuning of a dam replacement or changing and operating, I would note that this model, as it's set up for the floodplain analysis, is what we call a steady state model. So it's a peak flow in the model, but it's using the HEC-RAS modeling system, which is capable of running dynamic flows. So the model itself is able to accept a new flow input, which could be a full design hydrograph, if you will. So from the beginning of a flood through the peak to the end, with a dam that you're providing or you're proposing some kind of operation curve on, or the HEC-RAS model has the capability of looking at a dam breach scenario as well. So you could put your dam in and assume that it breaks. And because of the dynamic capability of the HEC-RAS model, which, as I said, we're not using in this floodline analysis, but it's in the model itself, then you could use the model and its basis to look at the dam and a dam breach or a dam operation kind of scenario and see how that changes flows upstream and downstream. I suppose if you had a significant, the only thing where you may have to extend some cross sections, I guess, if you will, if we've taken the limits of the cross sections to try to extend to the limits of the flooding. If you're putting in a major obstruction in a certain area that may increase flooding upstream, you may need to adjust some of those cross sections to capture the wider flood limit. But as I said, it's basically adjustments to the existing model to represent changes in obstructions or structures. And in the case of a dam, if you're looking at the operation or a dynamic kind of scenario, then you would need to run it in a dynamic mode.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take one more, and we got a full agenda. So Kristen, go ahead. Do you have a question?
Thank you. So I guess my question is overall with this updated mapping, did you find a decrease in floodplain areas or for development, or an increase due to more development since 2009?
No, overall, it's a decrease shown. In terms of the development, the majority of your watershed is rural in nature. So those development areas are really only impacting some of the downstream limits or locally significantly. So overall, the floodlines have generally been diminished in areas where we had poor representation of a floodplain before, or in areas where we're better representing the cross section now and better representing the flows. There will be some areas where the addition of bridges in this modeling versus not included in the 2009 analysis. There may be some local areas where we're representing now a bigger floodplain due to the impact of that bridge that is now represented, but in general, there's a reduction overall.
I guess I got one question, because I know you refer, Stu, to the 2009 assessment for floodplain mapping. Is what type of cycle is it that we follow for floodplain mapping once you're done yours, or is it an ongoing thing that's updated?
I can answer that
Yeah.
question. The study that was completed in 2009 is what we use currently for regulation purposes. And after 10 years, with technology improvements, with better refined data and digital elevation model, is what triggered this study. We started this work in 2018. We're just completing this work. With newer technology, if it becomes available, in the near future, then there is an opportunity for us to utilize that and make some improvements to these models. But as a requirement of the regulation now, we are being required to review it once every year, just to look at it and say if there has been additional models that are available, additional new data that are available that can make changes to the floodplain mapping. So it allows for a yearly review of our floodplain moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Girish. With that, I'll look for a mover then for the Board of Directors. Acknowledge the presentation from Stu Seabrook of Riggs Engineering on floodplain mapping. Moved by Anne Marie Gillis, seconded by Sue Case. Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as carried, and thanks again, Stu, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Okay. We're moving to items under 7.1, GM's report. Let Ken do his report for the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just prepared to answer any questions anybody has about the report.
Well, tell me how chocolates did you serve?
I lost count, and then there was a bitter feud on the Monday over who was the better server, myself and Rich. So Rich and I still aren't speaking to each other because of that. No, it was just one of those, like, yeah, it came in dribs and drabs, like I just lost count. I just got to the point of. Pretty much, let's just say, pretty much everybody who attended the day I was there got hot chocolate.
Okay, that's it. I'll look for a mover then that the Board of Directors acknowledges the General Manager's report dated April 11, 2024. Moved by Steve Miller, seconded by Greg Grimes. Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. 7.2, is that cover you, or you have an ongoing verbal report?
So I have a verbal report, Mr. Chair, thank you, because Conservation and Bear meetings on Monday, April 15th, so obviously didn't have a chance to get to the board. So one of the Conservation Affairs meeting was its annual general meeting. Chris White from the Grand River Conservation Authority was acclaimed chair. This is his second term. Jonathan Scott is the first vice chair from the Nottawasaga Authority. And Pat Warren is the second vice chair. She is from the Park Conservation Authority. These are their, I believe Mr. Scott's second term, and Ms. Warren's first term. Then they have an executive committee as well, comprised of general managers and Brad McGill from Quincy Conservation, Ron Baldwin from Lake Simcoe Conservation, and Chandra Sharma from Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority were appointed to those positions. The financial statement was presented, it was a clean audit. Small surplus was acknowledged by Conservation Ontario. And they also passed around the annual report. I have a copy of it. I can pass it around the meeting so everybody can take a look at it. If you really want a copy, I can get more in. It just goes over the organization itself. And to show you how it's grown, when I started day or two ago, conservation authorities, their staff were 4, right now, they're up to 12 staff. So they've grown to deal with all the challenges from the province. And then, as I said, their annual report outlines all the projects and things they were accomplished in the last year. As Bruce just mentioned, with changes to the Act, a couple of big things are obviously the annual review of floodplain mapping. Still no word on how that's actually going to be funded and how it's going to be resourced, because obviously it will take time to do that, but being a province, they just threw that out there for fun. Also, changes to the Act. The biggest one probably for us is apparently we are getting stop work order abilities. This is something we've never had before as conservation authorities. We had to rely on a municipality. Building inspectors to put a stop recorder on, but now we will have that process in place, so we're still evolving to see how that works out. As it goes forward, it's still very new. In terms of other activities, one of the big issues that came out late in the meeting was just a discussion about, and this might come up in our source protection meeting. So the province is phasing out private well testing by pump units. So your municipalities may want to write a letter to the province about this, because traditionally, if you had a private well, you could take a water sample to the health unit will do your water sample for free. Now the province has taken that away, they're no longer funding that. So it'll be up to the individual landowners for private wells to pay for it themselves. There's still a lack of understanding about how this works. Because if one follows social media, the response was great, I don't want to pay for my neighbor's well anyways, not understanding that their well and your well, chances are same aquifer. So there's still that thinking that a bunch of, oh, well, my well is my well, when it's actually drawing water to communal aquifers. But that's something that we may want to consider, or each municipality may want to consider of contacting the province, but this is probably a very bad idea. So anyways, those were the major issues that conservation authorities. So if anybody has any questions. Yeah,
All right, go ahead.
Will the Conservation Authority be sending to each of our municipalities a letter that, like we often at our council meetings get a letter, and then we can support that letter? Is
We
that,
can certainly do that. It's sort of outside of our scope, because the issue of private wells is very complicated, because it doesn't fall within the source protection mandate. Technically falls within the Ministry of the Environment's mandate to look after in terms of water quality testing, but it impacts everybody's life on a day-to-day basis. So there's some of those challenging things, but we can certainly send out a notification to the municipalities, just letting them know that this is now a thing.
yeah,
It might be the source protection committee that does that. We can ask Julie. She's
Okay.
online later on. Okay.
it just is easier to get support from your other counselors if you have that letter, even if it just states that this is what's happened there. And you know, it's a possible suggestion that you may want to write a letter, to support.
I already heard about this, and I think it was in our agenda package, like you say, and that there may even have been a motion in there to support them. So I'm just not, I don't recall who it came from.
I think we'll discuss that with Julie when she's online, and I know Savo Bayfield in Maitland Valley Source Protection. I believe there was a letter sent to the county of Lambton and asking for their support to keep the private wells funded, so. So we can deal with that a little bit later, okay? Al Broad, you have a comment?
It was brought up at the county of Lambton, so all the mayors, deputy mayors all have that information to go back to your councils now, so it was brought up and discussed at the county level.
We should be seeing that in our packages, we will.
All right, I'll look for a motion then that the board of directors receive for information the verbal report concerning the April 15th Conservation Ontario Annual General Meeting, which I should state I had a conflict, so I wasn't able to attend with Canada. Moved by Emery, seconded by Jerry Westgate. Any opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Okay, 7.3, that the board of directors, we have a risk management program, and Greg Wilcox, do you have any comments on that, or can you guide us through that, please?
Sure. We passed a few years ago a risk management and land classification guideline, which helps us in our inspection frequencies and some of the other scope of what we look at for risk management. As part of that document, we do an annual meeting of staff to discuss our risk management program and report to the board. This is that annual report. You can see some different items throughout here that were identified as, you know, things that were new last year in risk management. Some risk assessments and what common risks were found during those risk assessments. So those are completed every 2 years on our properties. And we're starting to expand that into some of our programs that exist on properties like education. We'll did a risk assessment this year for the first time because that operates on land. Just some updates on how many inspections and work orders we're logging now to keep track of our risk management program and make sure we're well documented. Probably the main couple of updates, the Coldstream soccer field, we had issues with that field. It has some corners that tail off and it has some, it's not very level. We've only had, since we got that property back, the management of it back in the municipality, we've only had one women's league who's using it 10 nights a year. So the revenue just isn't there to upgrade the field or the demand. So at this point for 2024, we're not going to operate that soccer field. We are actually doing a test a few weeks with a group who be led by Garish, who is looking at a pilot program to see if this field would be suitable for cricket. So we're going to run just a few weekends where they're going to do a couple of tests and just see if there may be long-term interest or not in using that field for that purpose. Flooding at conservation areas the last few years has been significant. It's always an issue. What we've realized is that sort of, you know, when it's flooded, people stay out isn't occurring anymore. So we're going out and observing a foot of water over the parking lot here in Strathroy. Every time I go by, there's trucks driving through it. Other areas where we have floating boardwalks, people are on them. This is in February with ice flows and cold, fast flowing water. So we're looking at some additional staffing. We're gonna have to really put some effort into monitoring, and we need a better system for closing properties when those conditions are existing, rather than relying on people to just stay out. So we're looking at adding more barricades, so temporary barricades we can move around as needed, and some permanent sort of post and chain gates that we can close areas off as needed, and especially in areas where it's going to be hard to get a barricade to during the flood. And then the only updates to the policy that came out of this was, now that we're doing risk management inspections with our education program, we didn't have listed a scope, or we had a scope but not a frequency. We only had identified frequencies for inspecting properties. So the recommendation from our education department is that they do their risk inspections monthly from September to June. So that would be added to our guideline. And then the last update is just simply that we are developing a conservation area strategy as part of the updates to the Act. Within that, Conservation Ontario developed guidelines for classifying property. Their guidelines don't align with what, their classifications don't perfectly align with what we already have in place through risk management. And we just simply want to add a statement in there that for the purpose of risk management, we're still going to use the classifications within the guideline because it better aligns with our risk management program.
Okay, questions for Greg? Emery?
Mr. Chair, just, can you enlighten us a little bit, because this is an internal risk management approach. So how are these findings and this good work being communicated with our insurers? And are we getting credited as an organization for proactive steps that this approach is taking?
So within this has all largely come with direction from our insurer.
Okay.
So we met and walked properties with them a number of years ago. This was part of that risk management memo they sent us that triggered some of the campground changes. In that same memo, it recommended we create a risk management guideline with land classifications. They were the ones, so in this guideline, the land classification recommendations came from Marsh Insurance. That was a program developed in consultation with Conservation Ontario. So this is all in line with what our insurer is looking for us to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Sue, Kate, you have a question?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, sort of more of a comment, maybe. I was going to ask you, so what are you gonna do with the field if it's not being, the soccer field, if it's not being rented? And last night at council, I asked our director of community services, and he said he was aware that it's not used very much, et cetera. He said it's actually, he loves going there. It's got such a nice, the whole ambiance and stuff, and it's more so the mosquitoes that were the issues from people. So I'm glad to hear that, Gresh is working on something to, still use the field, because that's what I wondered, what will you do with it? So basically, you still cut it and stuff.
Yes, that's the same report we got, was that's why, like at one time that field was wide, 2 fields were widely used at that property with minor soccer. Minor soccer backed away from the property due to mosquito concerns. So we intend to continue mowing it until we decide what the long-term path is. We are starting a property management plan for that property this year. That's going to take some time, but part of that will be to reach out to the community and to see what other interests there may be for that field and to bring that back to the board with recommendations. But at this time, it's not being planted or abandoned. We're going to continue to continue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. 7.3 then, that the board of directors acknowledges the report dated March 21st, 2024 on the authority's risk management program and approve the recommended updates to the SDRCA risk management and land classification guideline as outlined in this report. A mover, please. Oh, Marilyn McCown, moved by and seconded by Sue Cakes. Any opposed? I'll take that's carried. Okay, I believe, Greg, you're up again. 7.4 on your campground wastewater management update, please.
Okay, so this is just an update on what we had already started, which is the upgrades to the A.W. Campbell septic. So we had hired a consultant late last year. We're working through designing a new upgraded septic. What we have there is undersized, it's starting to fail. As it states in here, we're over 10,000 liters a day, which means our sewage disposal system is now requires a ministry approval through an environmental compliance approval. We have started our pre-consultation with the ministry and we're working on moving towards having a finalized design. The challenge that's noted in here, as we worked through this process, there was big discrepancies in how much water we actually pump and bring to our dump station versus the size they were recommending for design. And one of the things we discovered through further investigation is that what we're doing now to manage our gray water, so this is water from seasonal campsites, from their showers and sinks, not toilet facilities, is commonly done or has been done over the years all over the campground industry. Is it's been put into the ground through tiles, through what's called gray water pits, but these weren't done to any sort of specification. The individual seasonal camper has done their own. So whether they put in a barrel with gravel as a pit, whether they've got just a perforated tile 10 feet in gravel in the ground, and they're slowly letting their gray water seep and be disposed of that way. And we're coming around and pumping the black water and taking it only to the dump station. From those initial discussions, we don't believe, or we think there's a good chance that's not going to be permitted going forward. So we are working with our consultant to figure out alternatives, and we're scheduling as soon as possible a meeting with MECP to just make them aware of this is how it is being disposed of and see what their guidance is going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. For a mover then, that the board of directors acknowledge and receive their information report dated March 21st, 2024 on the campground wastewater management. Moved by Steve Miller, seconded by Frank Guinness. Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as carried. (7.5) dam decommissioning studies. Greg, you're popular today. Want to be the start of this?
This one, the report's very simple. It's just, we started this process. We've got these 2 major dams on the east branch of the Sydenham, the only 2 dams that exist on the main east branch. So without these dams, we would have a really large stretch of a significant sized river without dams. And we know there are significant environmental impacts caused by dams, and that both of these were built for recreation. They're no longer really serving those functions as well as intended. The swimming's gone, the boating isn't there because they filled in. So there's a limited recreational use from what was intended. So we started this process to look at feasibility of decommissioning those dams. We have attached both reports. They're very lengthy and not the easiest read. So we've also created summary reports for each, which are a little more concise, but still lengthy reports. So I don't know if you want me to try to walk through reports or if I just field questions on the reports themselves.
Okay, we'll see what questions we come up with. Suitcase, you have a question?
So I tried to read the lengthy report, and I called, our Director of Public Works and Engineering. So, I think that we should get the feedback from the municipalities, to let the engineers, you know, read it and give their opinion is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that was the proposal in here is at this point to receive it for information and to circulate it to the municipal partners involved and seek feedback from them. It's obviously a partnership on these projects. They're significant if they're removed. We think there's environmental benefit to removal, but if you read those reports, there's also some risk involved environmentally as well. And to manage that risk, which is the accumulated sediment, if we were to fully manage that, it really drastically increases the cost of removal.
So the reports have been sent out to the municipalities, and you're just waiting for your feedback.
They will be sent out following this meeting.
Can I,
Go ahead, Sue.
I did have one question about it all, whatever the answers are. What will, I'm not saying what are the costs, but where will the money come from to pay for this?
So that's a great question. Dam removal itself. The WECI program may be involved in that because it's a water control and erosion control measure. Grants, there will be grants very interested in these dam removals. The challenge comes with sediment. And that's gonna be much harder to find funding for. And so I don't know what the interest of the board is. We haven't done a dam removal of this scale. Historically, when these things were installed, it was a combination of provincial funding and the local municipal funding. That's how it's traditionally been managed, but again, this is new territory for us trying to look at removal, and we would seek any funds we could from outside sources, but in the end, the board would have, if we wanted to pursue this, the board's gonna have to decide, you know, which direction we go for seeking funding.
Okay, I'll take Anne Marie Gillis. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're right to be concerned about the sediment, because just from our experience where we took over the harbor and had to dredge, you would always dredge and then just take it a little farther out to Lake Huron and basically replace what came in. But now, that's a huge problem and a huge cost, so good on you for picking up on that. The other thing I just wanted to pick up on was what Sue was referring to. The communities that have had these dams and therefore have had these reservoirs for swimming and, you know, just paddling around. I'm glad to hear that there's gonna be a great collaborative effort, as opposed to us just coming in and saying, we're gonna take out your dam. Because it's gonna have a major impact on the communities that are there.
So the background to that is that a class environmental assessment would be done, which includes public consultation, like that would be a requirement of the dam removal. So that public consult and seeking that input is mandatory. We've done it in the past at Head Street. So this, in 2003, a full class EA was done with public consultation. And at that time, the final decision was left, from my understanding, Strathroy Caroline Council as to whether they want to proceed or not. And in the end, it was pretty split from the community feedback, and the do nothing, you know, to just hold on and leave it the way it was the approach, with some shoreline stabilization and some other fine tuning of work around the reservoir. But it was decided not to dredge, not to kind of invest in it, but not to move forward with removing it at the time.
Okay, Lori Scott, go ahead.
So our municipality has had dredging done on our river, correct? And we have had to take the sediment back to Northville to the main office and put it out on tarps, cover it, and then get testing done. Will this sediment have to go through the same process?
If it's being removed from site, which in both cases, we're in the floodplain areas and we can't leave that sediment on site. So if there was sediment management, it would involve removing it from site, which would involve the legislation that said it needs to be tested.
Because we had to then, after they did the tests and the results came in, we had a salt mine along that river at one point. So there's high content of salt, which make it very impossible to put it anywhere but a dump. So you're paying dumping fees, you're paying trucking fees, you're paying staff time as well. But the worst part is the amount of sediment that there is and where to store it and where to dry it to do the testing. Plus the testing costs on top of it. So we had to raise our prices at the marina for boats. As a result, we've lost a great number of boats out of there. The good news is that we have smaller boats coming in to take over the docks. And not have to worry about the length of and the depth of what we have to dredge now. But it is a huge, like we were $100,000 over the budget for the business unit. So that made it really difficult because there was no funding for that. And we took it out of reserves because you had to do it. It's just the way it was. But this could be extremely costly with sediment if there's a fair amount to take out. And where would we store it?
So if you look at the cost estimates, dam removal for both projects ranges from 500,000 to 800,000 to a little over $1 million. When you add in, if we have to do an active sediment management, as in remove it all, those budgets jump to 5 to 7.
Good conversation. Emery, you have any questions?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm particularly interested in this report and as it pertains from the farm perspective. And the tributary that we're looking at is a very clean tributary. We're not looking at substantial industrial north of it. And the type of sediment that we're discussing is largely agricultural sediment runoff. So it goes to behoove me to ask if we could please include an agricultural view of sediment. That's fertilizer. And for the most part, folks, most farmers, providing there isn't something there that is out of the ordinary, nothing initially jumps out at me on the A&L soil analysis that was done, that potentially that could be an offsetting revenue for some of the removal of the sediment. I would suggest that we include OMAFRA as a partner in these discussions, because that's an innovative way to take advantage of an existing one-time fertilizer source. And there may be innovation money to help us with that from the farm perspective. Also, I would suggest for the record that we also include the University of Waterloo in these discussions, because there are some studies in dam removal that are taught at that fine institution. There may be other perspectives outside of our scope and outside of the engineer's scope that might be worth considering. So I suggest those two partners be included in any discussions when we get to that.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, John Brennan, go ahead.
This will be a hot topic of discussion, I'm sure, at the Stratford Council when it arrives on the table. Emery makes some excellent points. I think that years ago, the council decided at that time that they did not want to be in the dredging business. And then they just viewed that as an eternal cost that would just come up every 5 to 7 years, and they decided to cringe away from that. But also, when we read something like this, we understand there's so many moving parts that no local solution is going to be able to be implemented without numerous effects in other locations in the watershed. So I don't think Strathroy-Caradoc necessarily wants to create, if you will, a new park just for the sake of having a new park to get rid of a pond. Nor do we want to have an ongoing cost. I can't speak for an ongoing cost of dredging, but that's been turned down years ago. So I think there'd be great interest in finding out at council whether or not this body would be acceptable, would say, oh yeah, we endorse do nothing. I think if we're looking for the political will to get something done, and if Strathroy Caradoc is going to have to be instrumental in that and be looking at offsetting any local costs with funding, I think a case is going to have to be made by this body that option 7, which is do nothing, somehow be removed from the table. Because I cannot speak for council, but haven't been around for a while. If you give the council the option to do nothing and there's no cost, well, hell, why would we go and get into all of this? That's just it's gonna be a big boondoggle. We're gonna be scrambling for money. It'll take years. It'll cost hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. And we don't want to do that because we've got other bigger priorities. So I think unless option 7 is taken off the table by some other body, and Strathroy Caradoc sees that they are somehow compelled to deal with one of the options, and it might be option 5, which seems to be the least expensive and possibly has the smallest number of immediate impacts. But somehow I think the municipal government in this situation is going to have to be herded a little bit, because I do not see an appetite on our council, at least the way it's been operating lately, to engage another big project that's going to potentially cost 500,000 or $1 million, $2 million, $4 million without knowing where we're going. And then I choose that because gee whiz, we want to do something. I think they're almost going to have to be, and again, I can't speak for a council, but if you give the council the option 7, do nothing, I'll bet you they're probably going to choose option 7. So if this body feels it's desirable or necessary to have dam removal, then I think that needs to somehow be stated by this body so that the local municipality can be guided by that, because I don't see much coming of this unless this body pushes and says doing nothing is not an option. That's more of a comment than anything. And Frank Kennis from Strathroy Caradoc, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not very optimistic. If you have do nothing on the table, I think we're probably going to see our council decide to do nothing, but I can't speak for them.
That's where my vote is going.
Well, that's what I mean. So that's my comment. So thank you very much.
Well, I think until the report is circulated, and like I say, unless Greg, do you have a comment as to what?
So the do nothing is a pretty standard option when you get into these class environmental assessments. And I think it may be that it needs to be in there. What can maybe be highlighted more is do nothing is short term until the dam life expectancy fails. And each year we wait, we're accumulating another 1,000 cubic meters of sediment, and the cost and the regulation of postponing may be a big hit in the long run versus dealing with it now.
If something could be appended to this report outlining that scenario, it may be of some help.
Okay, Kristen, go ahead.
Thank you. Which kind of lends to this gentleman's statement. I would fundamentally like the council to make that decision, and it seems to be the norm. But there didn't seem to be a lot on the do nothing versus the other approaches. And I am more curious about the do nothing. Because from what I read, these dams are in good condition, still have quite a long lifespan left to them. It's not something that's happening immediately, like just 20 to 45 years. And the sediment building up obviously would play an impact in the water flow anyway, naturally, correct? If the sediment was left to build up.
It will continue to accumulate.
Right, but it can only accumulate to a certain point in my mind is the way I'm visualizing it for the other one. Is once you get above that dam threshold, that sediment is going to start flowing. It has to, like the bowl overflows, right?
Eventually, in the cold stream scenario, I think it will continue to accumulate until that dam has failed. There's enough capacity, so every year you're going to accumulate. In Strathroy scenario, we'd have to look more closely. It has capacity left, but it is going to hit a stage where it's full. But it looks like that aligns with probably the end of life. for the dam. And I think the life expectancy for those dams was initially discussed, the consultant talked about a 50-year life. I think he's adjusted that based on the report we provided, which said they were generally in good condition. That's a report that's been done through Grisha's group on a regular basis, and that's a visual inspection. So again, we aren't, we don't have that information of do we have failure in the sheet pile below grade? Nobody's digging it up to inspect, but from what's visual above grade, they're generally holding up well. So they've adjusted that lifespan to 75 to 100.
Well, I think what we could do now is vote on this motion the way it is. And if there's a secondary motion that somebody wants to make in that regards, we'll see where that takes us. But right now, I think we need to circulate and get this out to the other municipalities and wait for it's gonna be a collaborative effort by us and the partners that are affected, so. If I get a mover for 7.5, that the board of directors acknowledges the report dated March 24th on the completed dam decommissioning studies for the Headstream Dam and the Coldstream Dam, and further direct staff to distribute the reports to the St. Clair Region Conservation Foundation and municipalities of Strathroy, Caradoc, and Middlesex Center. Moved by Terry Burrell and seconded by Sue Cates. Any opposed? I'll take that item as being carried.
Just I guess for reference to the past, like in today's environment, would you even consider building a dam like these dams anymore, or like if there was nothing there today, would you even look at something like this?
Short answer, no. No, and especially recreational dams, they don't exist anymore. We don't really, I mean, the permitting process and also the trigger for such a requirement is not there. A lot of other CAs, if you look at it, the 36 CAs, there's dam removals are happening. At least 1 or 2 dams are getting removed that are not being used and that are not having that environmental benefit. Overall.
Can I ask I'm just to clear this out of my head now, because I thought about the dam a lot. I'm curious too, if you could just give so if there was no dam, how does all that water affect everything now? Is it gonna cause other issues?
Through the study, through the reporting, we looked at sediment geomorphology, which speaks to how the river will behave if we were to remove the dam today. And the dam removal is a process. It's not a sudden removal. It is going to take place over
3 years,
3 to 5 years, and it's going to be a slow process. So the hope is that it will start flowing the same way it did 40, 50 years ago before the dam existed.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to keep moving here, get through this agenda. 7.6, the Highland Glen Conservation Area Reserve Funds. Greg, you're up again.
Yeah, I think this report outlines it. We have a reserve remaining for Highland Glen. That property, the ownership was transitioned to municipal ownership late last year. That reserve was created prior to 2023, and it was funded. The property was funded by general levy, because it was categorized as regional at the time, and it had some revenue from the boat launch. So between those two things, this was accumulated. We did this study where we thought we were going to spend all of this reserve. In the end, the study that was done on repair options for the boat launch came in under budget, so we still had this reserve when the property ownership transitioned to the municipal. So my recommendation is we have all kinds of risk management and other needs within our properties, and it would be a good use of the money to start addressing some of those risks and make the properties a little safer, and that would be one way we could spend this additional money.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead, Terry.
Just move on, just move on.
Okay,
Second.
that, I'll read the motion that the Board of Directors acknowledges the report dated March 19th on the Highland Glen Conservation Area Reserve and further directs staff to use the remaining Highland Glen Reserve funding to complete identified risk management measures by prioritizing projects that provide the greatest risk reduction with the available funds, which we're spending a lot more than 16 to go. So, questions? Go ahead, Al.
So is it a normal practice that our levy money gets spent on non-regional conservation authorities?
No. No, so the only other regionals would be the 3 campgrounds.
So we're spending a bunch of money on non-regionals through our levy money then?
That money would, if we did this, then yes.
With the Elvinston situation, should maybe not this money be put away, because I think we're gonna need a whole bunch. If Elvinston's in trouble and Petrolia and Warwick got the same problems, I think we should be putting this money, leaving it in a reserve. If we're gonna need it there, because, yeah, I think we're in trouble in some of those areas. I will not be supporting this motion.
Referring to the septic issues.
Yes.
Yes, yep, that would be a great alternative way to use this money.
We shouldn't be using our levy to buy a tarp for the winter tarp for the swimming pools.
Yeah.
I guess these are suggested projects from staff.
I was suggesting that we use it specifically for risk management. It's also reasonable to set it aside for campground issues that we know we have large capital expenses coming. Another alternative, you could hold a reserve for the 2 properties which we just provided ownership to Plumpton, Wyoming, where we hold conservation easements. I don't expect a scenario with a municipal partner, but when you have an easement, you have to inspect annually to ensure that compliance is there, and there could be a scenario where legal costs come in if we are required to enforce something that's within those easements. I don't anticipate that with a municipal partner like you would a private easement, but.
So I don't see this as a great amount of money that, once the project's identified, that we couldn't, discuss it at that time, like you've given us a list, correct?
Yeah, so I think what Mr. Broad is just pointing out is that a lot of that list is items within our local conservation areas that are funded by the local municipalities. And rather we could hold the reserve specific to regional parks, and then I could come back at that time.
And that's the direction I would follow then at that time. So
That would be great.
for now, I think 7.6 can stand. It's been moved and seconded. Ashley?
Moved, not seconded.
Yeah, Lori Scott. Any opposed?
I'm sorry, when we, I don't know what your direction was.
Oh, sorry, that the board acknowledges the report here, 7.6. And further directs staff to use the remaining Highland Glen Reserve funding to complete identified risk management measures by prioritizing projects that provide the greatest risk reduction with the available funds.
Can the mover not just amend that to what was just discussed,
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
rather than vote it down, just amend it to say?
To be honest with you, I think this is good use because we are covering items that are risk management related. So that is a potential liability to all of us. So I think it's a good use of the money. It's not a lot of money to begin with. And it's just a lot of small items that should be looked at. I like the idea.
Lori, go ahead.
If we use that money for the items that the actual motion does, that frees up general money that we have in our bank account to be used to help other places where we would be able to put a motion on the floor to put that money to another use. So I think risk management at the moment is a high priority. So we won't use general money for the risk. We can leave it as it is, and there's other monies that we can take to help with the other projects. So I don't think that we're not doing a good thing. I think the motion has merit.
Kristen Rodriguez, go ahead.
Thank you. So. That those regional campgrounds bringing revenue, and that's where your risk management, your offset is there. Secondly, you stated that there was an easement on kind of that, which does provide some sort of risk and liability. That's still an ownership of the St. Clair Conservation. Is that correct or not?
The property is not in the ownership of the Conservation Authority anymore. The Conservation Authority holds an easement on title.
Correct.
And so this is a bigger concern with easements, generally, when you have an easement on private lands and that land transfers ownership and the new person comes in and doesn't follow it. And then, you know, if it was, you can't cut the wood lot down and they do. Now you're into a legal battle and there's costs associated with that. Like I said, I didn't recommend holding it because it's a municipal partner and I'm going on the assumption that they're not going to violate the easement to the point that we can't work it out, that we would need to get legal involved. But there is always some risk associated with holding the easement because we're responsible for the enforcement of that easement.
Correct, and that goes to my point. So and with it not being a great deal of money, it kind of makes sense since this money was set aside for it, kind of in the first place and if got used, that it should still be there to protect that potential liability or risk down the road of such a small amount. And I think it's more appropriate use or going into a general capital. So I just don't think that's the appropriate use of it.
Well, I think the motion on the floor deals with whatever project provides the most greatest risk reduction. And so I think what's missing is that it would have to be spent because it was collected as a regional collection, it should be spent at one of our regional facilities, which we can't for that.
That's up to the board. If you'd like it restricted to the regional the campgrounds, then we would use that money or hold that money and come back when we have a project to spend it on, such as septic upgrades. It's the board wishes, because the way it's it's written now is a lot of those properties included and those projects included are not regional.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Burrow, do you care to amend anything?
No, the liability is general.
Yeah.
Even though it's for a specific area, we all bear the same liability.
Okay.
So I think it is, I mean, it's not a lot of money to begin with, and it just makes sense to, use the money that's available to reduce our risk.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead. Let's call the vote here and see if this carries. So, those in favor of the motion, as is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll make 10. So opposed? 6,
I'm
7.
opposed as well. It's Rhonda Jubenville. I'm opposed as well.
So I believe you make 8, so that motion does carry. Okay.
Did you add? Did you add her to be here now?
Second look like that.
7.7 is the auditor's RFQ. And that is changed. Correct? Let me flip here to the right. Yes, the audit services for commencing 2024 through 2028. You have any comments on that?
Every 5 years, Sinclair Region Conservation Authority sends out the RFQ for the auditors for the current year and with the extension of the next 4 years. So our current contract with the existing auditors expires after the end of 2023. So that's why we are sending, we sent the RFQ 24 to 2028. And we sent out on February 7th, 2024, and with the expiry date on March 15. So we got one quote back from our existing auditor, the MNP. The price did have a big increase in that. And basically due to two reasons. The first is when they quoted back in 2019, they materially underestimated work. So in the last 5 years, they received like a lower recovery rate, basically, for their services. So that's the one of the biggest reason they are increasing the fees right now. The second reason is high inflation since especially after the pandemic, just like everything else. So that has a big impact on their internal operations and their cost. So they're increasing the professional fees to recover their cost. And staff did review the last RFQ from the 2019. Like last time, we received two responses. One is from the existing auditor, and the other was from the prior auditor. And the MP price was like about half, so like higher than half of the prior auditor's price. So staff do believe they underestimated the workload back then. And based on that and the current market price, staff also negotiated with them that special discount for their price compared with the regular not-for-profit organizations. Staff do believe their price is reasonable, which is reflected in the current quote.
So the surprising thing is, it was sent out to 4 accounting firms. And we only received the one back, which was our current provider.
Right.
What was the previous amount, that just to remind us of what our annual fee we were paying? Do you have that?
So right now, for 2023, the professional fee is slightly over 10,000. Yeah, so they materially increased the fees, which again, mainly due to the underestimated workload back in 2019.
Maybe I'll ask Mr. Burrow if he has any comments on this.
Yes.
It must be, their business must be good.
I would suggest we send it out more than the 4. I don't know which 4 you send it out to, but I would circulate it again before committing to anything. I don't think it's fair, and anything you buy, whether it's just that have only one bid, especially when it's twice as much as what the last bid was. So I think it may end up being this, but I would suggest that you circulate it wider.
Okay, and I was going to state that our next item is the purchasing amendments that we're supposed to get a minimum of 3 quotes. So maybe if time allows, we can send that out for second round of quotes.
Yeah, it is up to the board. We can certainly send out again. We send out the 4 accounting firms. We send out is the MNP, the existing auditor, the prior auditor, the MPW, the BDO, and the Baker Tilly, all from our watershed. So the big 4, my estimate is their price will be higher than this. Last quote we sent out to 5 accounting firms, only because one of the firm was purchased by another firm. That's why we sent out to the 4. So basically we sent out to the same amount of the accounting firms as last time. And again, because last time the MNP price was about half of the prior auditor. That's why I say I do believe what they said about they underestimated the workload.
Okay, did they state any reason why they didn't submit any bids, or why they?
No,
Okay.
there's no response from.
All right, well, I'll look for direction from somebody here regarding in this regard. Kristen, you had your hand up first.
Thank you. And I am aware of accounting costs, I am too, in my profession. And I also checked the Varney municipality on his repay. We also deal with MNP. And I would absolutely agree that 10,000 was a big mistake somebody made. This is in line, in my opinion, our experience, this price is in line I don't necessarily agree with the price increases over the next 4 years. I think they're a little bit higher. Usually it's cost of living or inflation rate. And these are just a little bit above that on average. A little bit of what they've lost and that which isn't really gonna add up. I feel it's very much, the norm, unfortunately.
Al Rod, you had your hand up, go ahead.
Yeah, we were in the same situation in the township. Our costs went up quite a bit. In the past, we had tried to switch companies and they did have the lowest bid, but by the time they got done, it turned out they were more than the highest bid just because of the extra work that was required. You can do what you want, but you got this company that's been working for you. I agree with you. I think the workload probably was underestimated. This is no different than what we're seeing today. Good luck on getting anybody else to try to bid on. Township tried it and it didn't work, so.
Okay, well,
I definitely will support them.
hearing that comment, I'll look for a mover for this motion 7.7. Oh, go ahead, Sue.
So two things, also keep in mind that this discount that they've got saves us 22,000 over 5 years. But the other thing is, should we modify this slightly to say, like, I know things will come to our council when we only got one bid. And we have a motion to accept it, that it has only one bid instead of 3. Should we just add a line on here that we acknowledge there's only one? That's just a thought that I want to bring up.
That, I think it more or less says that in the report, but, I'm comfortable with moving ahead, like it was sent out and they didn't disclose why they didn't bid, and then we're all, like you say, Shannon says they were all within our watershed, so. So,
I
let's,
think that's a good point, though. It's just for the record. Especially if somebody's not meeting reports and whatever, they're seeing off the cuff. I just think it's such a small thing.
okay, want to note that for quotes that were sent, requested, that we only received one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just that we accept only one. Oh, yes.
We can add that, I guess, to 7.7, Ashley. That the board of directors,
Just, does that have an impact on the budget? Because I'm not sure what we budgeted, if we budgeted 10 and now it's 20, but.
Yeah,
Looking back at our budget increase for the year, it wasn't that much to begin with. This would be a substantial impact on the overall budget of the.
Yeah, it does have impact on our budget, but not material. I did budget an increase. I expect them to increase their price because that's what they've been complaining about, the underestimation of the workload and the lower than like normal recovery rate they've been experiencing in the last 5 years. So I did budget 60% increase in budget, and then the rest will absorb it to the existing budget.
that answer your question?
Yep, yeah.
Okay. All right, 7.7. That the board of directors acknowledges the report dated March 25th, 2024 regarding the request for proposals for audit services for the authority and foundation, and further appoints MNP Chartered Professional Accountants LLP as their auditors effective June 1st, 2024. It was noted that this was only one bid responded to of 4 requested. Any opposed? Sorry. Yeah. So, sir, sorry. First, Betty Ann McKinnon moves and seconded by Frank Kennis. Any opposed? That is carried, 7.7. 7.8, the amended purchasing policy. Okay, I'll read that. The board of directors acknowledges the report dated March 26, 2024 regarding the proposed amendment of purchasing limits and authorizations in the SCRCA purchasing policy, and further approves the recommended changes within the report. So moved by Greg Grimes, seconder please. Al Broad. Any opposed? That item is carried. 7.9. Designation of provincial offenses officers. This report's from Ken Phillips. Ken, do you have anything to comment on?
Just, basically the changes in the act, they changed the regulation number under enforcement officers are enforcing the regulations, so we need to reappoint them under the new regulation as well. For section 29, actually for section 28 and 29, they've also added the trespass to property act. So we can enforce that as well. So it's just an administrative change we're required to do by the property.
Okay, a mover then, that in accordance with section 3.1 of the 30.1 of the Conservation Authorities Act, the following staff be reappointed as enforcement officers under the prohibited activities, exemptions, and permits regulation. Ontario Regulation 41/24 and Provincial Offenses Act. M. Delsley, J. Vasman, M. Weber, and that in accordance with section 30.1 of the Conservation Act, the following staff be reappointed as enforcement officers under the rules of conduct in the conservation areas, Ontario Regulation 688/21 and the Provincial Fences Act. G. Wilcox, L. Dirks, and K. Smith. Mover, please. John Brennan, seconded by Anne Marie Gillis. The only comment I'll make is Melissa, as your date of training was October 2014. Are you up to snuff with everybody else?
Yeah.
Okay. Any opposed? I'll take that as being carried. Okay, 7.10. It's a staff report providing details of recent legislative and regulatory changes under the Conservation Authorities Act and Ontario Regulation 41/24 be received for information, and further that the board support the timelines for implementation of policy, guidelines, and procedural documents and the transition procedures and guidelines. Mover, please. Steve Miller. Seconded by Terry Burrow. Comments or questions? Kristen Rodriguez.
Thank you. So where it noted the impact to finances, it really wasn't stipulated with the loss of revenue, so it's not completely understood. Approximately loss of 50 permits and 130 DART SCRs, which I believe those have to do with the drainage. These, like, when the municipality wants to do some sort of drainage repair maintenance. So, like, what is the financial impact of this change?
So we estimated the financial impact to be about $25,000 loss, but we are offsetting that by, we've had a change in staff, in our regulations department, and will not be put in that position. So that's how we.
Okay, so that would be my question, was there any consideration for offsetting? So there was some sort of planning?
Regulations. So we just hired 2 new regulations officers. We just decided to make a change.
Okay.
And we will not be filling that position.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Any opposed to that? 7.10. I'll take that as being carried. Just touch down here. 7.11, stewardship permitting fees. This is good news, I guess. That the board of directors acknowledged the report dated March 28th regarding stewardship permitting fees and further direct staff to reduce the required permit fee to $200, only to be applied to stewardship projects to cover staff time reviewing and permitting under Ontario Regulation 41/24. Mover, please. Steve Miller, seconded by Jerry Westgate. Questions, Alvin Rod?
Yeah, I'm not sure how we could have a two-tier permit fee, and it's not very fair because you could have a landowner that's got, very beneficial environmental projects, stewardship projects, but if they're not involved with that handful, they're gonna pay the full price, and that's not fair to them. Their project might be every bit as valuable as any other project in any group puts forward. The permit fee is there to cover staff time. And we've been told all along here that we haven't achieved that today, where staff time is fully covered by the permit fee. So they're already getting a reduced fee today, and now we're gonna reduce it even more. I just don't think it's fair to everybody else that's not in that group. And there's no way I can support this. A two-tier permit fee is totally wrong. Thank you.
Ben or Melissa, can you comment as to why the change?
Yeah, so, in the past, we have, applied this fee inconsistently, so, generally, RLSN and Conservation Authority led projects has been waived for those projects, so we have not been receiving a fee at all from them. And then other landowners, as well as the other, groups mentioned, have, had a fee for our permitting review. The intention to reduce the fee is that these are beneficial projects to the environment, to the watershed. We want to entice landowners to do these projects, and to your point, Al, about not applying to landowners, we would apply these to landowners if they were doing them privately, not through one of these organizations. But the intention is that we are not deterring landowners from completing these projects while still recouping some costs. They are generally not too much of a concern from a flooding and erosion perspective, and they are beneficial to the environment.
Anne Marie Gillis, go ahead.
I think you had the minute first. It's
Oh.
Kristen Henderson.
Kristen Rodriguez.
So that was gonna be my concern as well. I mean, I am a private landowner and I spent the last 30 years revegetation. Revegetating, my blocks, to benefit the environment and the shoreline. But I would fall under something different than. So this would only be things that require permitting through the regulation. Okay, something that's larger. Planting trees doesn't require a permit. It would be wetland creations, erosion control berms that get built to slow down erosion in farm fields, anything within the flooding and erosion hazard as per mapping. So there's obviously, like you said, tree planting, and that's not something we would issue a permit for, so that's. It's exempt anyways. You don't have to pay a fee. But when you're saying it applies between private and stewardships, then what's the point of these fees if you're gonna allow it right across the board? Like, I'm confused, like, it sounds like it's not on. Well, with the stewardship programs, some are gonna pay the full fees and some aren't, but what's the difference? So this reduction would apply across the board to anybody doing stewardship works on their property, to include like wetland creations, erosion control berms, and those sorts of works that were listed. So drain, erosion control, rehabilitation work, anything that would require a permit through the Conservation Authority. Through our regulation, we would issue a permit for those works. The fee would be reduced to try to entice people to still do those works. They're still beneficial to the environment, but realizing we still have to review the works to look at flooding and erosion impacts. Okay, so it won't be two-tiered then, basically is what you're saying. No, not to landowners versus companies. Right, so it's across the board. Okay. And maybe we should word that better then?
Yeah, I guess what one of the concerns is the $200 covering our fine.
Yes, it
It will, cover our time to review those works. They are relatively minor in the big scheme of things, compared to other works that we're reviewing.
So this amount's gonna be across the board for any of these projects.
Just for stewardship projects.
Rod, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, so can we change our recommendation, because it needs to be changed to state that instead of being only to apply to stewardship projects, that the board of directors direct staff to reduce the required permit fee to $200 for all stewardship projects.
Makes sense.
I don't know who the mover and seconder was, but that's, that would be fair.
Who did you have down for moving in second?
I moved it.
Okay.
I'm not changing it. No, I'm kidding.
Fine.
Slap it. Yeah, I'll lie that.
Okay, so you got that change noted, Ashley? Okay, so any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take item 7.11 as carried. Okay. You have the informational items, which is 8.1 A to M. And that the board of directors approves the consent agenda and receives the accompanying items 8.1 A through 8.1 M as information. A mover, please. Don Brennan, seconded by Emery. Do you have an item you want to address?
Two items. One, I just wanted to say thank you for a good application. $25,000 is a nice step in the right direction, so thank you for your good application. Rash, thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I want to recognize Emily and Nicholas. We were part of the team that applied for the grant.
Yeah, that's on item D, or, sorry, that's
8.1E.
E, yes.
8.1E.
The grant we got from the federal government on that.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, the other one's the letter of correspondence, but
that's a little bit further down, right?
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments on the correspondence? Seeing none, I'll take that. Oh, on information items, sorry. On information items, any other questions regarding those items? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried. Okay, 9.1. Correspondence from Mr. Don Crow, that the board of directors acknowledges the correspondence received February 24, 2024 from Mr. Don Crow regarding the operation of the Darcy McHugh Dam and concerns for Otter Creek. Garish, I guess I'm going to ask you just to respond to that and give us an update as to how that's being addressed.
When the McHugh Dam was built in the 1980s, expropriation certificates were received upstream of the land. The way the McHugh Dam functions is it diverts water entirely to the St. Clair River, but only 50% of the flows actually get diverted to the St. Clair River. The other 50% approximately ponds upstream and floods upstream areas. And through the expropriation certificates, there was a legal route that the office had to take, and that identifies that the McHugh Dam be used only when Wallaceburg is faced with an imminent threat of flooding. So there's a legal requirement that when we operate the McHugh Dam, that we don't use it more frequently than what it is designed for. And through the manuals, the dam is expected to be used about 6 to 10 years, once every 6 to 10 years. Otter Creek is one of the distributaries that flows into the North Branch, and we had not had any monitoring that was done in Otter Creek. Through this funding, through the Community Emergency Fund, we are able to deploy instrumentation to monitor the water levels and also precipitation that is falling on the Water Creek. So with enhanced monitoring, we strongly feel that the flood forecasting and water program will be enhanced. But it may not lend frequent operation of the McHugh Dam because the criterias and the requirements are different.
And my understanding is you had communication with Mr. Crowe here on, in regards to this and, the reasons and rationale as to why. And hopefully, we won't have to use the dam as maybe as frequent in the past, few years as we have had operated, so.
Yes, we have responded and we continue to communicate with Mr. Crowe. So he understands the reasons why the dam was built and the conditions.
So basically, I need a mover to receive this correspondence and, moved by Steve Miller.
Mr. Chair, like a minute. We're done.
Okay, and seconded by Kristen Rodriguez.
And I may just add, are we going to the trip? In June?
Yes, I believe that's a part of our tour, annual tour. Go ahead, Amber.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to amend that, receive to also, forward this information to future discussions of any, modifications of McHugh Dam, including repairs, that this letter serve as part of the discussions. So that it not be lost in a file cabinet. This old fellow might not be with us when that day comes, so.
So we keep this as record on file is what you're asking, yes.
That is also included in ongoing work to be done on the McHugh Dam, that this be part of the discussion with any. That's not just received and filed, but it's actually an active, part of an active file.
It's a better.
Thank you, that's the terminology, thank you very much.
So is that okay with the mover and the seconder that we? Steve Miller, is you okay with that? We keep this as an act of,
I don't care, this old gentleman's quite aware of how the dam works.
Yeah.
So this is nothing new to him.
okay, and Kristen, you're good? Did you second that?
Yeah, yes, I'm absolutely good.
Because you suggested the word.
Yeah.
Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried. Okay, we have item 9.2, which is a long letter from Deborah Boise. Yeah,
It's two different letters.
two different letters, okay? That the Board of Directors acknowledges the correspondence received on March 11th and March 21st from Ms. Deborah Boyce regarding the proposed landfill in Dresden. I'll get a mover for this, please. Greg Grimes, seconded by Anne Marie Gillis. Comments, Mr. Alvarad.
So has the St. Clair region sent comments into the ministry?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we're not permitted to send comments, like we will be sending comments in with regard to the flood hazard portion, there is a small portion of cost. But with the changes to the act, we can't comment on anything else.
Oh, okay.
So we can't comment, like most of the calls we've received are strictly around natural heritage issues or water quality. And that's not within our mandate to look after, so we just respectfully said, unfortunately, we can't do anything. Now, that being said, if the board wishes to send comments to somebody as a political body, then the board we can send a correspondence letter to say our concerns, but in terms from staffing, commenting perspective, we just can't comment. So,
I guess I would just highly encourage all board directors to take it back to their council. What is being proposed is 700 trucks a day. That's one every 2 minutes, and they could be going through Lambton County, not necessarily Chatham Kent. So there's a lot of issues that could be brought up there. So I would highly encourage any council to go back. There's proposals on there where you have to comment, send your information off to bring your board, Minister Environment, whoever, because what they're asking for is pretty extreme.
I would just like to say, Pledge of Wyoming already has, they've had it come to our council, and we have done.
Okay, well, it's all noted of our municipal reps here and,
Well, can I, just, Cause I don't think we've seen anything on this, in Middlesex County, so are a lot of these trucks coming down like the 402 and.
There's no traffic study has been done.
Okay.
But those potentially could come down 402, down 21 to the dump. They could cut across through Chatham Kent, nobody really knows. But we do know if it's 700 trucks, wherever they come from, even we get half that amount coming through Lambda County, that's very significant. And of course, we don't get any taxation if it does happen to go through, so we're basically there to defend ourselves as far as trying to keep the roads. They could even go through Danya-Femia, there's lots of shortcuts that they can zip through, and our roads can't handle high traffic trucks. It's just in the wrong place, so where they're putting it, it's just in the wrong place. There's 10 residential houses there, it sits on Molly Creek, Sydenham River's right there beside it. It's just wrong. There's nothing wrong with what they want to do, but that's the wrong location.
Okay, good conversation. We'll take that motion as being moved and seconded. Any opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. 9.2. We do have an in-camera item to discuss, so if staff can oblige us, we can deal with that.